Okay, so let's continue for the recording. Okay, still the same types of cell signaling. I think just to show you in diagram form, autocrine, the self-target itself. Okay, forms of chemical. It still form signaling molecules here. It target itself. Cell 1 and cell 2 is itself. Okay, the second one, signaling across gap junction. So a cell target to a cell connected via gap junction. So this is considered direct. Okay, let's go. So this is explanation of the for each type direct via gap junction. So a tunnel protein that reach the cytoplasm of neighboring cells. Okay. Only small ion molecules are directly exchanged. So you can see this picture here. The bigger molecules, the big in size molecules cannot pass through or cannot use gap junction as their transportation or as their cellular communication. Okay. Uh, the protein, the specialized protein, we call it connexin. Okay. So it's a 6 subunit connexin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So these subunit fit together, forming like a tunnel here. Okay. It only allow hydrophilic chemical messenger to travel through the lipid membrane. Okay, hydrophilic chemical messenger can travel through the lipid membrane. So keep this wording here. We will look into the properties of chemical messenger. So typically the gap junction involve the movement of ion. Okay, next surface marker. So it's considered direct. A certain protein presence on surface membrane. So this marker detect or can bind to a compatible or specific molecules or markers. Okay, example here, cell destroying immune cell. So if you read in immunology, so that cell is has surface marker. Usually immune cells have surface marker that can recognize undesirable cancerous cells. Okay, indirect cell signaling. So indirect will involve a specific chemical messenger or signal molecules to serve the designated purpose. Okay, so this chemical messenger will synthesized by the process or by the cells. Okay, this is the process. So what happened? Release of chemical messenger from signal cells. So signal cells will release chemical messenger. So that chemical messenger will travel through extracellular environment to the target cell, cells number 2. So when it arrives at cells number 2, it will cause the response. So that is the communication between the signal and the target cells. So this is the first one, paracrine, short distance paracrine cell signaling. Local chemical messengers whose effect exerted only on neighboring cells. So this type of cell signaling is a local cell signaling. Okay, meaning the traveling of the chemical messenger is not too far. Okay. Simple division within the interstitial fluid, their action is restricted to short distance. So this do not gain entry. So they do not need the blood system to travel because it's short distance and do not gain entry to the blood in any significant quantity because they are rapidly inactivated by locally existing enzymes. So interaction between cell 1 and cell 2 is localized, and at the localized area also has certain enzyme that can inactivate when the response happen or cause or occurred. Okay, so this is example histamine, neurotransmitter, T cells body. Next, autocrine, short distance, the same cells. Okay, so just now I asked you to predict whether autocrine signaling cells is direct or indirect. So it is actually indirect short distance communication. Okay, why it is under indirect? Because although the same cells interacting I mean, cell 1 is the cell 1, signaling cell is cell 1, target cell is cell 1. So these cells still produce or release signal molecules or chemical messenger to cause effect to itself. Okay, so that's why it's considered indirect. So this one, lastly, the long distance indirect cell communication. Hormones. First one is hormones. So hormones, there are two types of hormones, endocrine and exocrine. Endocrine hormones is hormones secreted will travel via blood system. But for exocrine, hormones or substances or secretion secreted by a gland that travel via duct system. Duct system here can be lymphatic system. Okay, this exocrine hormone will not involve the blood system for traveling. They just travel into the duct system. So hormones chemical messengers specifically secreted into the blood for transportation or into the blood by endocrine gland in response to an appropriate signals. So arrive at the target cell or arrive at the target area, it will bind to the target cells. Okay, that hormones will bind to the target cells and cause response. Okay, non-target cells are not influenced by any blood-borne hormones that reach them. How can I give example here? Okay, let's say liver cells. Okay, liver cells and muscle cells. Liver cells can secrete hormones like insulin or glucagon. So this one involved in glucose regulation or glucose metabolism. Okay, when the glucose is high, the liver will is it liver or is it pancreas? Gosh, I can't remember. Okay. um, Sorry, it's pancreas. So pancreas will secrete insulin when the glucose is high. So it will travel to the muscle or liver cells, bind to the cells, target cells here, whether muscle cells or liver cells. What happen after that? It will get or it will consume. I can we will use the word consume the glucose in the blood into the cell. The liver cell take glucose in the blood. Okay, muscle cell take glucose in the blood. Okay, and then use it or keep it in the system. Okay, but when the glucose is low, um, pancreas will release glucagon. Glucagon will still travel to the same site, liver cells and also the muscle cells. But adipocyte at the liver cells or adipocyte at the muscle cell will work and will release the glucose into the blood system. The muscle cell also will release the glucose into the blood system. Just that explanation or analogy to explain to you that the target cells of a particular hormones have a membrane receptors that will bind to that hormone. Okay, so that hormones has specific receptors to bind. Okay, different hormones, different receptors. Okay, next neurohormones under long distance. Why we call it neurohormones? Because these hormones or this secretion released into the blood by the neurons, the neurosecretory neurons. That neurons able to secrete uh, substances. So we call it neurosecretory hormones. Neurosecretory neurons. The substances that being secreted by this type of neuron, we call it neurohormones. Okay. So neurotransmitter is the chemical messenger released from the axon terminal of the neuron in response to an action potential that influences another neuron or an effector with which the neuron is anatomically linked. So neurotransmitter also an example of neurohormones. uh, because it released or secreted by the neurons. Okay, and it cause effect to the target cells. So this is summarized also: direct signaling, autocrine and paracrine indirect cell signaling, short distance, endocrine indirect cell signaling, long distance, neural signaling, okay, under long distance cellular communication. So this slide here, types of cell signaling. So this is a type. You can see the secretory cell. So the features of these types is this is the component, okay, or the item, secretory cells. Autocrine, paracrine cell signaling. The cell secrete the secretory cells is various, can be various. Secretory cells for nervous cell signaling is neural. Okay, secretory cells for endocrine is endocrine, gland. Exocrine can be various. So the target cell, most cells in the body. For nervous cell signaling, long distance, indirect. The target cell can be neuron, can be muscles, or can be endocrine. Okay, when the neuron or neurosecretory neuron secrete the substances, we call it neurohormones. Let neurohormones travel. It will usually travel to be received by the muscle or a neuron or endocrine gland. Okay, so the target cell can be endocrine cells or the muscle cells or the neuron cells. Okay, endocrine cell signaling. The target cells can be most cells in the body. Okay, I think when we go through the systems of the body, thermal, digestive, circulation, you will know why we said most cells in the body. Exocrine. These target cells can be sensory or neural. Signal type. Autocrine and paracrine, the signal type is chemical, meaning the substances, okay, chemical. Nervous system, nervous cell signaling, electrical and chemical, endocrine, exocrine, chemical. Okay, the secretion, the chemical messenger. So the signal type we say chemical signal type. Okay, transportation. Transportation of autocrine paracrine extracellular fluid. Why? Because it's local area or itself, the cell itself. So it does not involve circulatory system. Nervous system, the transportation by synapse. When you learn about neuron action potential, you understand what is synapse. Endocrine. Uh, the transportation is via circulation system or the blood. Okay. Exocrine, the duct system, lymphatic is actually external environment. Okay, it's not the circulatory system, it's external. The speed of action or speed of cell communication. Autocrine, paracrine, rapid. Why? Because it's local area or itself, right? So the speed of cell communication is rapid. For nervous system, the speed is rapid. You refer back here. Nervous cell signaling is electrical and chemical. So and it involves between one neuron to another neuron. Okay, so it has to be rapid. It cannot be slower. It has to be rapid. Endocrine much slower compared to endocrine and nervous system, nervous cell signaling. Uh, for exocrine can be various, can be slower, can be rapid. Okay, so duration of response. Once it bind to the target cells, what happened after that? Okay, so from secretion, traveling, binding to the target cells, and then cause response, the duration response. Autocrine paracrine is a short duration of response. Nervous system, electrical, rapid, speed, right? Rapid. So it's a short response. Endocrine took longer time. It will take longer time to cause response. Why? Secreted by the signaling cells, travel via the blood, can be near, can be far, and then bind to the target cells. So the duration of response is actually taking longer time. Okay. Endocrine can be various. Alright. So now we understand this autocrine, nervous, and endocrine. Indirect short distance, indirect long distance. Okay. We know that this indirect cell signaling will involve chemical messenger or signaling factors or signaling molecules. So now we learn about the class or the properties of the chemical messenger. Okay, the properties of the signaling molecules. So the chemical messenger can fall into two distinct properties or chemical groups. Okay, hydrophilic and hydrophobic. Hydrophilic, highly water soluble and have low lipid solubility. Hydrophobic, vice versa, have high lipid solubility but poorly soluble in water. Example for hydrophilic: ions, insulin hormones, CAMP, cyclic adenine monophosphate. Okay, enzyme. Example for hydrophobic: steroid hormones. Okay, so this one, hydrophilic and hydrophobic. Hydrophilic, water soluble, very high water solubility but low lipid solubility, right? So you can see from the blood to the extracellular environment, it dissolve, it travel or dissolve, travel easily. Okay, but yeah, secreted by exocytosis. Why exocytosis? So this is hydrophilic, so exocytosis, lipid, and this is cell membrane is a lipid bilayer, right? So vesicle inside the endocrine cells contain this hydrophilic messenger. So to be released from these endocrine cells, it will execute exocytosis and then release to the system, extracellular fluid and the blood, okay, easily, because hydrophilic messenger is high soluble to water but low soluble to lipid. So let's see hydrophobic messenger. Endocrine cell secreted by diffusion. So this endocrine cell synthesize this hydrophobic messenger, and then it released by this endocrine or secreted by this endocrine cell via diffusion easily. Why? Because this hydrophobic messenger high soluble to lipid. So and membrane cell is lipid bilayer, right? So high soluble to lipid, but eventually in the extracellular fluid or also in the blood, it needs something to travel by binding to carrier protein. Why? Because this hydrophobic messenger is very low soluble in water, so it needs carrier protein to bound with them to travel for the transportation. Okay. So this is the explanation. Hydrophilic messenger dissolve in aqueous solution. Okay, like ECM and blood. Hydrophobic messenger bind to carrier proteins in the blood because high soluble of in high solubility of lipid, low solubility of water. Okay, carrier protein. Help hydrophobic messenger dissolve in aqueous solution. And messenger C carrier protein. Okay, so messenger bind with the carrier protein. It will make messenger carrier protein complex. So this is biochemistry. Okay, it will travel via the blood to the target cell. Okay, so this is the signaling cell. Endocrine cell is the signaling cell. Okay, so this is comparing between hydrophilic and hydrophobic messenger. Okay, so now we will go into we want to enter the new subtopic. Okay, involve the receptor. Okay, hydrophilic messenger. The receptor type is transmembrane. Hydrophobic, the receptor type is intracellular receptor inside cell. The effect of hydrophobic is rapid. The effect of hydrophobic is slower. Transportation, diffuse in extracellular fluid, diffuse easily, okay, hydrophilic. But for hydrophobic, in extracellular fluid, SD is short distance. Short distance, it can be in the extracellular fluid, but for long distance, it need carrier protein to transportation, to travel, to transport to the target cell. Okay. In terms of storage of hydrophilic messenger, this hydrophilic messenger stored in intracellular vesicle. Okay. Remember, the endocrine cell secrete this hydrophilic messenger and keep it or stored it in the vesicle, intracellular vesicle. Eventually, to be released, upon to be released, it need to execute exocytosis. Okay, so that the chemical messenger can be released into the to the outside environment, to the target cells. Storage for the hydrophobic messenger, synthesized on demand. When there is a stimulus or signal, the endocrine cells or signaling cells will synthesize this hydrophobic messenger, eventually diffuse across the membrane easily, but entering the blood system in need carrier protein. Okay, type of receptor: transmembrane receptor, intracellular receptor. Just now, okay. So there are many types of receptors. Okay, yeah, review. So before we go to the next chapter here, the type of receptors here, I will draw the like a mind map to help you understand this chapter 2. Okay, basically chapter 2 is about cell communication. Let me draw first. So chapter 2. About cell communication. Okay, so basically how I observe this chapter. This chapter 2 is about physiology at cellular level, or study of function at cellular level. Okay, so what is the actor for chapter 2 is cell. So cell need to communicate, right? Communicate. How do they communicate? In two mode. Okay, this one is direct, indirect. Okay, the concept here, no chemical messenger involved. This one involve chemical messenger. So under direct we have short distance and long distance. Ni ada hormon, ni ada neurohormon. And short distance ni ada autocrine, paracrine. Okay, ingatlah ada sel 1, sel 2, sel 1, sel 2, berapa jauh. Okay. So we already talked about chemical messenger, right? So eventually chemical messenger here, we need to know the properties of the CM. Okay. So that's why we learn about hydrophilic, okay. Tak tahulah you faham ke tak ya. So hydrophobic, hydrophilic eventually relate with the types of receptor, whether transmembrane receptor or intracellular receptor. Why? Hydrophobic, high high soluble to lipid, right? So it can pass through the lipid bilayer, the cell membrane easily. So the receptor will be inside the cell, intracellular. Hydrophilic, high soluble to water but low soluble to lipid, right? So it cannot pass through easily the lipid bilayer of the cell membrane. So the receptor need to be at the membrane cell. We call it transmembrane receptor. Okay. So yeah, basically, I think that's what we learned just now. All right.